Welcome to the Tokumba Chronicles, a podcast about the journeys we take and the stories we make. In this podcast, I'll be sharing moving stories that are sure to empower, educate, and entertain you. Stories have an incredible way of connecting us to one another, uplifting us, and giving us permission to tell our own story. I will be speaking to entrepreneurs, trailblazers, and dreamers who have incredible and powerful stories to share. From their triumphs and tribulations, we'll be drawing out the details, the how-tos, and the lessons we can take away. Life is what you make it, and only you get to decide how your story is written. I hope by sharing these stories with you, you will live inspired and equipped to live yours out unapologetically. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the chronicles. I am your host and chief storyteller, Tokumba Kweki, a multi-passionate entrepreneur, founder of the award-winning Tokumba's Kitchen and London African Food Week. When I'm not cooking up a storm in the kitchen or regaling guests with my own epic stories, you are most likely to find me in the middle of the dance floor, bringing the party to life. In this episode of the Tokumba Chronicles, I interview someone I consider to be one of my soulmates, Kerrita McClaughlyn. We met here in London a couple of years ago at a meetup group event and instantly clicked over our shared love of culture, West African food, and traveling. Though things have changed so much since we recorded this episode due to the current COVID-19 pandemic and the huge job losses facing people globally, I still felt that the content of our discussion will bring value to many, hopefully more so as things start to get back to a new normal. Kerrita talks to me about her journey working as a journalist covering the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., to moving to Brussels to chase her childhood dream of becoming a foreign correspondent, and how she then created new opportunities for herself that took her on a different path. I can tell you now that Kerrita dropped some serious nuggets for how to negotiate a better salary offer at the point of a new employment. She gives a complete strategy that would allow you to not only get more money, but also ask for other things such as flexible working, working from home, or whatever it is that suits your own interest and current reality, even if it's asking for an MBA. In fact, a day after we recorded this interview, my editor shared Kerrita's tips on negotiating your salary offer with a friend who was then able to negotiate a 10% increase as well as more holiday and working from home. Honestly, Kerrita is a legend, and I undoubtedly will be bringing her back to share even more of her knowledge. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the chronicles. Welcome to the Tokumba Chronicles. I am so excited to have my dear friend Kerrita on the couch with me today. So Kerrita is the Director of Corporate Affairs at Mars. Yeah. And so obviously I've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs on the podcast so far, and I myself as an entrepreneur, but one of the reasons I'm really excited to have Kerrita is you are a director in corporate affairs at Mars, which is like a global company. Yeah. So how did you get there? Tell us a little bit about your background, your history, and how did you get to Mars?
Okay.
No, Mars the planet.
Well, I'll try to keep it short because it's a long story. But as you can hear from the accent, I'm American, Jamaican American. I went to study in Brussels.
Okay.
To do my master's and kind of just stayed in Europe, never left. But I worked for an international NGO, did that for a few years, then went into an international consultancy.
Okay.
And then when I came out of that, I worked for Unilever, another big multinational here in London at the global headquarters. Doing all their global external affairs, which is the same thing as corporate affairs. It's just different companies name it different things. Okay. And then coming out of Unilever, they were merging the business, parts of the business I was working for, and moving it to Rotterdam, and I didn't want to live in Holland. So I knew people at Mars. It's another big and great multinational. So applied for a role they had coming up, and that is the short answer.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay, so let's take it back. Back. So American of Jamaican descent, and then Brussels. Yes. Why? Like, okay, tell us a little bit about where did you grow up? grow up in Jamaica? Did you grow up in what part of America did you grow up in?
Yeah.
And what took you to Brussels?
Okay, so I was born in Jamaica. I'm from St. Anne, for those who know. My mother is from Manchester, but my mother's family has always kind of lived back and forth between Jamaica and the US. So I was raised partially in both.
Okay.
I was raised in Brooklyn, the old Brooklyn, not this new gentrified mess
The
that
nice
now exists.
Brooklyn, the Brooklyn of the day.
Yeah, the biggie Brooklyn, that's the one I'm from. So even though I was American and had those privileges, I was also an immigrant. So I think I always thought of there's more to the world. If my family could move from Jamaica to the US, I could move somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I graduated university. I went to school in Boston,
Okay.
moved to DC, and was working there and decided to go back to grad school. But I'm like, I don't want to stay in America. And I don't know if it's the same here, but we could get financial aid and go to school abroad.
Oh,
when you're
really?
in the US, yeah.
So you can get because
Yeah,
it's
so
very difficult to get financial aid to study in America.
It's
isn't
a
it?
study in America, but if you're in America going out, like I could have come to the UK, I could have gone to Australia, I could have gone anywhere, but I pay to the American system.
Oh.
So there was I actually went to a British school, the University of Kent, but their Brussels campus, because I was studying international affairs. And because of the EU, so that's what I did. I was like, well, since I'm gonna get financial aid to go here, let's go. So when I showed up, like, was the first time I'd ever set foot in Belgium. I showed up the morning of, and classes had started. I dropped my stuff. I had a B&B for like 8 days, and then I had to find an apartment.
Oh wow!
And yeah, just
and was that your first time
luggage.
in Europe?
Yep.
Had you traveled outside of the US before?
Yeah,
that?
traveled outside of the US, but I'd never been to Europe. But
Okay.
I'm also the type that will just rock up to the airport with my passport. So I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but it worked for me.
Okay, so why international affairs? What did you study your undergrad, and what made you decide to go into international affairs? And what exactly is international affairs?
Okay. So I studied journalism in undergrad and was working as a journalist. I worked in newspapers and magazines. And when I was in DC, I was actually covering the US Supreme Court, so covering law.
Oh.
But I always wanted to be a foreign correspondent. That was my childhood dream. So I had studied the journalism bit of it. And the international affairs is essentially international politics, international business, international culture, all rolled into one. So if you want to be a foreign correspondent, either you go abroad and work directly and work your way up, or you get the degree and then get in. So that was the plan. That's not what then happened, but that was my thinking.
Okay.
And since I was already living and working in DC, I already had the US government propaganda, so I said the EU would be new propaganda to have.
Okay, so and whilst you were in Brussels and the plan was to, become a foreign correspondent, what happened to then derail that plan? And where did the plan then take you instead?
Yeah. So I lived in Brussels and then was going home. I was writing my dissertation, and I saw a job for an international NGO to set up their media communications department. They didn't have one. And I was like, oh, I can do this for a year. Like, that was the plan. 4 years later. But yeah, the plan was to do it for a year. They were trying to get a UN resolution. So I had to do a lot of the work at the UN in New York, in Geneva, and different capitals across the world. So it would actually give me that international politics and communication experience. So the plan was to do that, then go back to journalism, which then never happened. Yeah, it just kind of kept going. Yeah.
Okay, so after you did that, working with that international NGO for 4 years, what was next? What happened after that?
So I got bored. So we did one UN resolution and we're about to do another, but it was the same thing, working with governments, with multinationals, with different NGOs. And I was just like, I can't do another 4 years of this. So we would use different communication agencies. Okay. And one of them, I was like, oh, you at least if you go in-house at an agency, you can work with different clients. So you're not bored. So when I was ready to leave, I was like, look, guys, I'm ready to do something new. I can do what I'm doing here for you guys, but for different clients. And that's what I did. So I moved over to Hill and Knowlton in Brussels, and they had a lot of global health, global NGO clients. So I went over to that side and started doing work for WHO, UNICEF, pharmaceutical companies, anyone kind of working multinationals. So I did a lot of work in Africa, in Europe. So I could do the same thing, but not for just one company, which was what was boring me. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I really love and admire about your story is your way of creating opportunities for yourself, and not necessarily being able to approach this organization and be like, hey, I can do essentially what I'm already doing at my job and do it for you, rather than waiting for them to offer you that. I mean, talk us through that, because I don't think that's something that is very familiar to the British psyche. I know that, I mean, when I lived in DC,
that's American all the
way. American thing where, there's a lot of a lot of people get jobs through speculative applications like that, whereas here in England, a lot of time people are waiting for that job to be advertised and then try to apply for it.
Yeah, so the one good thing about American capitalism is that we are taught from school, like, don't wait for things to be handed to you. You have to make the way, and it's who you know and how you lobby and network. And I know that's hard for people because, I'm an extreme introvert. So I hate talking to people. But I'm in fields where that's all you do. I talk to people all day. But you have to learn, you have to be mercenary. You have to realize, nothing's going to be handed to you on a platter. And especially if you're Black or woman or LGBTQ, you're already coming from behind to kind of catch up in this space. And then from what I saw of, my white colleagues and other students in university, they would have these internships because their parents would set them up. They would have these connections, and these jobs were never advertised. In journalism, you're as good as the last paper you wrote, and they would be in big newspapers. I'm like, how did you get here? I never saw that printed. And it was because they would network, or their parents would network. So I learned that lesson really early on. So when I came to Europe, I was like, the same thing. It's make sure you stay in touch with people, make sure you connect, you go to the events. And even if you just go talk to one person. So if you're introverted, you're not going to be talking to a whole crowd. But if you just find one person at an event and just keep in touch, LinkedIn, go to events, all of that, then you kind of build your reference. Because at my level now as a director in a global company, these jobs don't get advertised. You get headhunted. But I mean, at best, by the time you see these jobs on LinkedIn, they've already found all the candidates that they're interviewing, and the LinkedIn is just for legal to say that we publicly advertise it. But as you go up the ladder, jobs don't get advertised. It's who you know, it's who knows you, and you'd be surprised how many people are watching you from afar. So how you show up in events is important. But you also have to figure out, what do you want to do? Every 3 years I do a self-assessment. Am I doing what I want to do? Is there something else I want to learn? Is there another field I want to be in? And if I get different answers to these things, it's start networking. So now within Mars, I work in corporate affairs, which is pretty much communications, crisis, policy. But I enjoy marketing. So I've just gone to the marketing VP and be like, I want to learn more. I want to work with you and your team. And now I'm doing that. Amazing. So always be learning on a job. Don't just do what you're hired to do. I think too many people, and I've seen that in Europe, with Americans do less because we're just taught differently. But in Europe, people get hired and they're like, this is my job. This is what I do. And it's not, you can always learn on the job. You can always switch careers, switch within the company or even outside of the company. But too many people don't take advantage of what there is to offer. It's not a one-way street. The job needs you and you need the job, but what are you getting out of it? They're getting your labor, but what are you getting out of it? And it doesn't always have to be money. You can learn a new skill, or they can send you back to school, but especially when you're negotiating. Also, do you want more holiday time? Like, I think people just think of it as transactional, like it's money and that, but no, you can get other things out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I know that since I've met you, I mean, it was for me living in Washington DC. I always tell people I didn't fully understand what networking was
until you go to America.
Till I got to America, until I got to the capital and lived in Washington DC, where it is very much a transactional city where people are fleeting.
You go out
in
every
and out.
night. You're
people
meeting people.
I mean, I was working with the homeless population, and they used to go to networking events to eat.
Oh yeah, because there's free food
and
free drinks.
And every single night of the week, there was like so many different types of networking, and a lot of times, people were very much about who are you, what do you do, and how can you help me with.
That's the downside of it. But you have to learn the system.
And I think having lived in England and lived in Nigeria and then lived in Washington, and and for me, I guess I was lucky because I'm quite extroverted anyways, so I was very quickly able to adapt myself to that. Oh, okay, this is how we do it, and kind of use that to my advantage, so that when I did come back to England, I was able to then be like, start using that American mindset of trying to create opportunities for myself. So rather than waiting for Facebook to invite me to the event, I'm going to Facebook.
All they can say is no.
Right?
All they can say is no.
So, I mean, I love that. And again, also that, what you're saying about even right now within your role, knowing that you have an interest in marketing, but that's not what you're employed to do. That's not your day-to-day job. But being able to speak to the VP of marketing and be like, I want to learn this role and go for it. I think that's just something that is really, how can we get, I mean, I guess for me, as somebody who's an entrepreneur, but also, because again, one of the reasons why I wanted you on this podcast was, I don't believe everybody should be an entrepreneur. I don't believe everybody needs to be an entrepreneur. But I think, like you said, if you are going to be working, it's about knowing how to get the most out of that system and knowing how to get the most out of that opportunity that you're in, and looking at your job as, yes, this is something that I love to do now, but I love that thing that you said about every 3 years being able to do a self-evaluation to say, is this still what I want to do? Is what I signed up for 3 years ago aligning with who I am today? Because, we evolve and we change, and sometimes people get stuck in the rut because they haven't understood that actually this job that I applied for 3 years ago, I was a completely different person. I had different ambitions, I had a different mindset.
And also different needs. You may need more money now. You may now have a family or a partner or whatever. Where you were 3 years ago may not match your lifestyle now. And the thing with jobs, which people need to understand, like, they will let you sit there for 10 years doing the same thing if you haven't shown any ambition or shown any affinity to do something else within the company or out. Like, capitalism works by having people like stay where they are. So you have to kind of take your own career path in your own hands. And a lot of me and friends have done is flip between companies, because you will stay in your company, but another company will offer you more money or a higher position or more benefits. Then you can do that for a few years, and then you can boomerang back into your old company if you like the ethos and all of that. But some people think you stay and you get rewarded, steady raises. But say you come into a company and you didn't negotiate, so your pay is lower than everybody else. Even if you get great bonuses or raises every year, you're still behind the curve. Whereas if you went somewhere else, got more money, better title, then you've now leapfrogged. And I think that's what I observe in the UK is a lot of people think I go into a good company and I'm going to stay there for life. Whereas if you look at how like global talent works, you're loyal to yourself. And I mean that in the nicest of ways, but you're loyal to yourself first. It's what these companies can do for you, because you are an asset. You should do your education that you become an asset to the company. So each company you go to will be an asset. But to sit there and think that they're just gonna reward you and push you up, no, that's your responsibility to always be looking around for what's, not to say leave a job every 6 months. I wouldn't tell anyone to do that. But what, like the 3-year thing, what do I want to achieve in this 3 years? And if I have, then leave, go somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think also one of the things that I've learned from you, and also again just learning from other people and having lived and worked in America, was this thing about negotiating your salary.
Have
like,
to negotiate.
I was like, man, I wish I'd known you like 10, 15 years ago. Because I mean, I guess for me, I mean, it's interesting because I have never really worked in corporate. I've always
but
worked
it doesn't matter what
authority.
You do. I don't care what you do. Negotiate.
I have to say, when I worked, I just assumed that, you know, and again, you see jobs being advertised and it would say from 32 to 40K. And then they will offer you 32 and you just kind of accept that.
Yeah, but they said they would go up to 40K. So you've left 8K on the ground.
So talk to the audience, talk to the listeners about how do you negotiate, number one, how do you determine what your salary offer should be or your salary request? Because again, sometimes, you know, I know that sometimes I've seen job adverts when I was applying for work and it'd be like, what's your expected salary? Do you put what you're currently earning or what you hope to get from this particular company because based on your experience? I mean, I am just like, it's a new field for me. So I'm like, I've been leaving money on the table. That hurts.
And women have the hardest problem with this. I mean, even in America, even though women negotiate, we don't negotiate as hard as men. So
I was on Twitter recently. I came across a lady called Cindy Gallop, and she has a saying that you should ask for what you should ask for is the amount that you can say out loud without laughing.
I would agree with that. So first thing, there are sites like Glassdoor, which is in the UK, where you can see the industry and what the kind of general salary is, so you can benchmark where you are against that salary. But also, this is what I say about networking. If you join like on LinkedIn, on other places, there are communities of people who are in your field and people will talk about like, okay, this is the kind of salary band. So do your research, Glassdoor and other places, talk to people in the industry. And then when you're negotiating, ask for at least 10 to 12% more. It's between 10 and 15% more than what you currently earn. Because the thing I said about if you come into the company and you're underpaid, then you're already behind the industry curve. So if you're making 40K somewhere, but someone else negotiated and got 50K, if you and them are now both looking for another job, you're 10K behind. So if you still ask for 40, they're asking for 60. Now you're 60. Now you're 20K behind. So it's looking at the industry average and adding to that. And then people think negotiating like, oh, they'll withdraw the job. And I think that fear is what you have to address. It's not even the money. But you have to understand that jobs hate going through the process of hiring people, because you have to put the word out. You have to have how many interviews. So at the point they've offered you the position, they don't want to go back and reopen and re-interview. So this is the only time you have their backs against the wall. So this is your time to negotiate. And as I said, it doesn't necessarily always have to be money. If they say we can only give you 10 extra K, well, do you want more holidays? You can negotiate holidays. Do you want shares? You can negotiate shares. So don't get fixated on money. It's what's important to you. So if you're a parent and you need flexible working time, you can negotiate that when you're getting the job. So if they say we can't give you more money, then you say, okay, I want to work a 4-day week, or I want to. So you have to figure out, I think the first thing, what's important to you. If you need money in an expensive city like London, we all need money, then money is what you're going to focus on negotiating. If you're a parent that needs flexible time because your kids are in school and school holidays, then actually vacations and flexible working time are more important to you than money. So figure out what it is you want. But also, when you are offered the job, that is the one time you have the most leverage. Because when you're on the job, you can negotiate like incremental raises and all of that, but it's not going to be as much as what you can get when you
Yeah.
get the job offer.
So you are like just dropping gems. Like honestly, like I
hope
said,
so.
I wish I had known you. Like I feel a bit upset at myself because I'm like, rah, I was just leaving money at the table because whilst I was working, it was literally whatever I was offered was what
You
I
took.
accepted and what
Yeah.
I took. But you know, lesson
Lesson
learned.
learned. Yeah.
Lesson learned. So talk us through that process. So you've gone for this job, you've been interviewed, and they've come to you and they've said, we want to offer you the position.
Yeah.
And is it when you then get your official offer letter that's telling you this is what the salary we're going to be offering you? So what do you then do? Do you then email them back, call them? How does that process work?
So when you get the offer letter, don't get excited and say, yes, I've signed it. Say, I'd like a few days or a week to think about it.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's the first thing you do. Don't just jump because somebody offered you something. Like, no, be like, thank you. Can you send me the offer letter? And then when you get the offer letter, you're supposed to review. And then usually you're going back and forth with HR. So you can go back and say, oh, I see that it's 40K. I was expecting that this would be 48.
Wow.
Yes. So you pick whether you're going for 10 or 15% more. And then you say, yeah, I was expecting 48. Could you go back and ask the hiring manager if they'd be willing to move up? So usually you can say 48 or 50. You'll settle on 45, 46. So always go
ask for
higher
because
they're going to negotiate
it's a negotiation,
down.
of course.
So this is a negotiation. So you either say 10, I'd say 10 to 15% more than what they've offered, because on the back end for the company, they have that 10 to 15% waiting. But if you never ask for it, that nobody's going to volunteer it for you.
Wow.
Yeah. So even if you negotiate,
capitalism is evil. Evil people.
It's just the system. Even if you negotiate and it's like 42, that's $2,000 more than you were gonna get. So
and
that's
in a city like London, that's your transport.
That's your transport.
That's your transport.
So that's why I say, like, some companies can maybe only go up $5,000 or $2,000, but that's still money you should be getting. Don't just leave it.
Yeah.
And if, say, you ask for 48 and they say, honestly, we can only do 42, and you say, that's disappointing. Is there anything else you could offer me to compensate? And then you can can I get 2 more days holiday time, or could I work from home 2 days a week?
And this is across all, not just corporate.
All industries.
This is like
NGOs always negotiate. And as I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be money, but what's important to you? It's money, it's time, it's something else. Or, you know what? I want to go back to school and get an MBA. Would you guys be willing to pay for it? So again, that's something that you can do. They pay for it. Yeah. And when a company pays for your school, then you have to stay there a lot longer. Yeah. But that's fine. Yeah. If I have to stay here 5 years, but I get an MBA I didn't pay for. Yeah. Yeah. So really think about what you want out of things, because the mistake I see people making, they just think, this is what the job needs and this is what I'm gonna do. But what do you want? It's a two-way. They wanted you, so what do you? And
I think that's the key thing. It's about realizing that, because even with interviews, people always they don't have questions that they're asking of the company. They haven't researched the company.
That's
because
insane.
It's just, and I think sometimes it comes from a place of, especially if you are job hunting and you've been looking for a long time.
You get desperate.
You get desperate and you just start applying to
anything. Like, that kind of looks like something I want to do. Yeah.
And I think, I know that I've been there where I've literally just been like, you know what? I need a job. So let me just start applying and just not necessarily being discriminatory about places that I was necessarily applying to. And it was only when I got into the job and it's like, okay, maybe this is not the
but place. People forget that where you spend the most of your time as an adult is at a job. So if it's a toxic work environment or it's non-nurturing, or then that's 40, 50 hours a week
Yeah.
that is coming into your psyche.
Yeah.
So yes, we all get desperate and kind of take jobs we shouldn't, but then we all learn from our
Yeah.
experience, because usually it's a horrible place to work. Well, we kind of knew that going in. So
Yeah.
you get what you put out.
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, I understand. I would never say not take a job, because again, expensive city.
Yeah.
You have to eat, but go in with that mindset. I have taken jobs in the past where I knew the cultural fit wasn't there, but it was a means to an end.
Yeah.
And then you go in and really, what do I want to learn from this job? What can I do to build up my
Yeah.
resume, my CV, that I can move on to a place and to
Yeah.
a job that I much prefer? But don't go in there and get like depressed and then also become toxic
Yeah.
yourself. I feel the people I've seen become toxic on jobs is because they're waiting like for like a parent to give them something,
Yeah.
which means you don't understand the job market. You don't understand capitalism if you go in thinking this company has to give. They don't have to give you anything. They gave you a
Yeah.
job. That's
Yeah.
it. You have to take what you need out of.
Oh my
Out of
goodness!
it.
I mean, yeah, I think we're gonna have to bring you back.
Part two.
We're gonna have to be a
As
part
long as you have
two.
more wine, I'll be here.
Yes. Okay. Just going back to. I mean, my mind is just still blown. I mean, we've talked a lot, and I
Yeah.
know even just the way I've kind of approached LinkedIn, just from speaking to you, speaking to other people, I've just realized that again, I'm really feel like over here a lot of people are underutilizing a resource like LinkedIn.
That's the one thing I
mean-
see people do here. Like, LinkedIn is magical. And I don't own stocks in LinkedIn, and I'm not a spokesperson for LinkedIn, but I've been on LinkedIn since 2006.
Yeah.
And I can tell you how many jobs I've gotten because of LinkedIn connections, or how many opportunities I've managed to connect other people to.
Yeah.
Like, everyone is there. If you're in tech, if you're in finance, if you're in pharmaceuticals, everyone in the world is there. And the thing about LinkedIn is who you're connected to is what guarantees the jobs that come into your feed.
Yeah.
So in the networking, when you go to a conference, when you go to an event, connect with the person you met.
Yeah.
And even if you just passively kind of like their things and all of that through the years, trust me, when something comes up in their company or in their field, they'll remember, oh, blah, 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 was interested in this.
Yeah.
I wonder if she's open to the opportunity. As I keep saying, like, as you get more and more up the line, jobs just are not advertised.
Yeah.
It really is the network that you have created that will then get you to the next step. And LinkedIn is an easy way to do this across borders. I've worked in multiple countries. I have connections from all over the world.
Yeah.
But those connections, you can have someone in Germany or the US or even Nigeria who knows someone
Yeah.
here who could get you a job. So really curate that, and please don't use it as like social media. This is professional, because I've seen some dodgy LinkedIn photos.
Yeah.
This is professional.
Yeah.
The things you post, don't post your conspiracy theories like it's Facebook. Have a professional photo.
Yeah.
The things
Nice,
you talk
yeah.
about, post professional articles, engage. There are different groups on LinkedIn based on what you're engaged in the groups. But that's the one, be professional.
Yeah.
This is not like social media like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. It is people, your future employers are there,
Yeah.
or your future business investors, because LinkedIn isn't also just about corporate jobs. You can get founders are there, like angel investors are there.
Yeah.
So act accordingly.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love what you said earlier about the fact that, people are always watching, because, more and more I have come to understand that, sometimes you don't even know who knows you and who's seen you, and really how you show up, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether even on your social media profile.
Because people don't know how to act online, which is like, if you're gonna be, if you are self-employed and you don't care, fine. But if you're ever gonna engage in capitalism.
Yeah.
How you show up on all your platforms is important.
Oh my God, amazing. So you've lived, and how many countries have you lived and worked in at this point?
4 or 5, yeah, at this point, and counting, because who knows how long I'll say in this English.
So, so you from Brussels, where did you go to after you were working in Brussels?
Yeah, so I worked in the US, worked in Brussels, worked in Geneva, worked in the UK.
Okay.
And then in between worked in multiple other countries, but didn't physically lived in these countries. Yeah.
So part of your job obviously involves a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
And also, you also enjoy traveling just for your own personal thing.
Yeah.
And I think you said you took some time out and traveled to Brazil.
To Latin America, yeah. So I spent 6 months in Brazil, yeah.
When was that? What happened? What made you take that decision? And how was that experience? Especially somebody who, works in corporate. Because I think, again, just from what I know of, podcasts that I listen to and other friends that I know who work in corporate, it can be very, very stressful.
It is.
And, having to, especially as a minority, especially as a Black woman, having to kind of navigate. And I think for me, one of the things that's always kind of stopped me is I know my mouth. And I feel like sometimes if I worked in those environments, I would just
have to edit a lot.
And I don't know if I would be able to do that. So I think part of the reason why I never went down that path was just because I just did not feel like I could fully be myself in a space like that. So what has that experience been like for you, and how have you been able to like navigate, especially, being an American, being a Black woman, and then working in Europe and then coming to the UK, and just love to know a little bit more about what those experiences have been like.
Have a good therapist on hand, I would say. I mean, even if I was working in America, the higher you climb, the more you are the only one in the room. And that is draining. That takes a toll on your psyche. And I think our parents' generation didn't talk about the toll it took. Thankfully, we are more open about therapy and like getting support, because that's what's kept me sane. But the reason I had a burnout. I was climbing the ladder, getting promoted in these senior roles, but I was the only person, lots of responsibility. I was living in a country with a very tiny Black minority, and just didn't have the kind of support system. And there are microaggressions everywhere, especially as a woman, as a Black woman, and you have no one to talk to, nowhere to turn.
Give us some examples of some of the microaggression, because I think that's something that a lot of people say, and but some people don't always necessarily know what is microaggression, and how does that come across at the time for you to recognize that, wait, did that just happen? Like,
no, so you get things like, especially if you're successful, people will make little comments like, oh, it's only because you're Black, or it's only because you're a woman, or it's like, oh, but would you know that that's why it's called microaggression, because it's little things that if you confronted them, you would look like the crazy Black person. But the tone and the phrase that said that, what it means. And it's always scared to tell you that, you're in the room, but we don't really want you
It's
here.
like, know your place.
Know your place kind of thing. And like you, I have a mouth and I talk back, and that comes with a price. Like, I
Angry
could
Black
be a
woman.
VP somewhere now, but because I like being Black and being true to myself. And it's not like I'm walking in there like Malcolm X, but I'm not going to let you disrespect me. Like, that is just never going to happen. And when you're always fighting for space and to be in these rooms, it takes a toll on you mentally and physically. And I was working for a consultancy, heading up their food consumer health practice. And I was like working 15-hour days and like seeing other people working less and getting more opportunities. And yes, I was getting promoted. Yes, I was getting the money, but I had no life whatsoever. And it was taking a toll. I started getting migraines, and I remember I went to the neurologist, and he did all the tests and all of that. And he's like, yeah, there's nothing physically wrong with your brain, but if you continue the way you go, you will die, and you will die soon.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm not dying
That's a
for
wake-up
nobody's
call.
job. Yes.
That was a
And
wake-up
really, a
call.
month later, I quit. And 2 days after I quit, I was on a plane to Brazil and was there for 6 months. And in the end, ended up like traveling for a year and a half and really taking a break and healing and figuring out, doing one of my little 3-year things, but really thinking through what was important to me. Is it getting the titles, but also understanding, like, I was trying to please my parents. I was always a straight A student, like high achiever.
Okay.
And I was like, I call it failing upwards.
Yeah.
Because I was climbing all these heights, but it wasn't my
For you.
dream. It was like them, proving to them that I could do it. And like that burnout was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I then was like, what do I want in my life? And it's like, I've had all the achievements on paper, so what do I want from me? Yeah. And then after a year and a half, when I came back, then I was like, oh, I want to live in the UK. I don't want to go back to the US. London is the closest thing to New York. So, okay, place. Now I know where I want to be. What kind of job do I want to do, and all of that, which is how I ended up at Unilever, because the company's purpose matched what I was looking for, and it was in London, and it was also multinational. And that's how I came. I had other job offers in that time that would have been more money, higher titles, but I'm like, that is going down a direction that is not for me. And I think a lot of people in corporate are stuck in jobs they don't want to do because it makes their parents proud. It looks good on their LinkedIn and all of that. And I wish more people would have that come to Jesus moment and be like, is this for me? Yes, on paper it matches all the things that the world is proud of, but for your own mental health, what is right for you?
Wow, amazing. I mean, I love this woman so much. I wish I could tell everyone how much. I mean, I've only known you a few years, but you have been such an inspiration to me, and you've also just been how you show up for me, and how, because I know that, I mean, it was funny, earlier this year, a friend offered me a position in his startup as a community engagement manager. And actually what had happened was, when he first decided he needed that position, he spoke to me about it, and I kind of made a joke. I was like, oh, I could probably do that job, and he laughed. But then at that time I had another job offer, and also we have history, so I was just like, probably working together is not going to be a great. So he then employed somebody else, but then 3 months later he came back to me and pretty much was like, I want you because you know, this new person now living and stuff. But then when we were negotiating, the salary wasn't great, but because I saw the bigger picture and I saw that there was a lot more opportunities that could be open to me. And also I believed in the vision of what he was trying to create. So I said, yeah, I'll jump on this. But then we were negotiating the time, and it was just something as basic as he wanted me to do 2.5 days. And I said, I can only do 2 days. And then he came back to me and he was like, well, if you'd applied for this job based on your CV, you wouldn't have gotten an interview.
Ooh, but then you don't want to work for someone like that. That Maya Angelou quote is what I live by. When people show you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
Trust your gut.
And I think for me, I think especially because as somebody who I have always had multiple interests, and I've always like tried to do this thing, and then sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't worked. And I know in terms of if I'd stayed in one particular career, I would definitely be very senior level. But, and then being an entrepreneur where people see you as, oh, you know, what exactly do you do? So when he said that, I had to like sit down and look at myself and be like, what?
No.
Like, I mean, I would have been doing that job 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Easily. And at this level that I am now, for you to be so disrespectful to my accomplishment just because on my LinkedIn, I don't have what you perceive to be the right title and the right job. I mean, it was such an eye-opener, and it was definitely you know, this person has now really shown me who they are. And I was like, and I'm so glad that whatever hesitation that I had, about taking that role meant that I didn't take that role. But I also know that just like through meeting you, you've really helped me regain my professional confidence in terms of remembering that, yeah,
you're that bitch.
I'm that bitch. I am. And it's such a great, refreshing feeling because especially at this stage in life where, you know, you meet some women and it's a case of, and I don't want to say women don't support each other because I don't believe that. All my life, I've always had women supporting me. But then you also get to a stage where, as you get older, it becomes we don't do new friends. Yeah. And I'm not going to tell you what I know because I want to keep all that information to myself.
But who does that serve?
It doesn't serve anybody.
And when you look at other communities, they are sharing information. They're sharing opportunities. So why shouldn't we? Yeah. Like, you're just doing what everyone else is doing.
Exactly.
And I am against Highlanders. So there's a school of thought is there can only be one. I can only be the only Black person in senior levels. And if you're a Highlander, I don't want you in my circle because so what? You're VP, you're president. If there's no one behind you, if there's no pipeline, then what is your legacy? Yeah. It makes no sense whatsoever. If you manage to squeeze through the door, prop it open so someone else can squeeze through. And the more people squeeze through, the more the door will widen. But you have to pass that on. Yeah. Like, this corporate world has a language of its own, has to-dos. It has things that you wouldn't know not coming in. Yeah. And if your parents didn't work in these worlds, then you won't know the language. I've seen there's Insecure, the episode where we Molly talked about that. Yeah, Molly has the new lawyer and she's trying to hip her to game and the girl is like, you're a hater. No, that is really real. Corporations have their own languages, their own ways of working. And somebody needs to teach you that. Yeah. It's not something they teach you in schools. It's not something that just comes. You could be offending people left and right and not even realizing it. So what would I be if I'm the Black person in there and the intern that comes in, I'm not hipping them to gain? Yeah. But also to the intern or the junior person coming in, be open to a senior Black person or another person of color trying to talk to you. Yeah. They're not trying to hate. Yeah. It's they have survived this hazing and they're trying to make sure that you have the steps to climb up the ladder, which is why you can't be a Highlander. You have to reach back and engage with the people coming in so they have the steps. Like, if you want to stay in corporate, this is the road. This is how you climb and not lose yourself, because I've also seen people climb and reject their community and I just couldn't be that person. Like, I am a Black person in this space and I'm going to be a Black person in the space. I'm not going to pretend and hide who you are. Like, that can't help your psyche.
What do you think he is that's kind of helped you retain that knowledge of, you know, I am a Black person in a very senior position in a corporate space, but still holding on to that? What is it about your experiences that you think has actually helped
I think it's the ignorant Jamaican in me. It's just, Well,
I was thinking that. I wanted you to say yourself.
Honestly, if you're from cultures that are extremely proud, like Jamaicans and Nigerians or cousins in Africa, you no one can tell you what to do. And it was also seeing my mom, who works in the legal field in New York, and seeing her like prosecuting people and going up the ladder and like literally cussing her bosses out because she didn't get opportunities that other people got, and then cussing them out and getting it. Like, she was a great role model for that, working for New York State in a legal capacity and climbing the ladder and making sure like raises, opportunities that she called them on the mat for it. So me and my sisters, I have two sisters, had that model of, no, you're gonna go to work, and if they give white people that, you need to get it too, because that's what we were it was embedded in us. And then when I lived in Belgium, which is very white, it's just making sure, like, I had Moroccan friends, I had Somali friends, like making sure I had a community of other marginalized people who could also, like, so you don't feel crazy. So the microaggressions you're getting at work and all of that, you had someone, and also cool white people who got it. You have to have a mix. I'm not arguing for segregation, but you have to find a way to be grounded. And that's not necessarily going to be work friends. You have to make a community. And even now in the UK, like, I go to a power supper club that's Black women in senior roles, and that's the one safe space we all have to talk about our experiences and what we're going through and share ideas and support personally and professionally. But you have to form your tribe, and and in Belgium, when I was there, my tribe was often virtual. It was reaching back to friends in America. It was connecting to friends I had here in the UK. It doesn't have to, like, be physical, but you have to have a tribe that grounds you. And people who also tell you you're fucking up and you need to, like, you need that. You need grounding. And then people who see when you're losing yourself. Because you can lose yourself in these roles. Like, these jobs will suck you in and force you to be like everybody else. But you have to keep your humanity. You have to keep what makes you you.
Amazing. So let's go back to Brazil because I'm so jealous. Brazil has been on my list, like my top 3 countries.
It was on mine too.
I need to go
bucket
to
list
before I die. And I mean, just I wish I'd some point before I became a mom, you know, got to go to Brazil, but it's still there, and I still want to go. But so again, why Brazil? And you know, you quit your job and then 2 days later you're on a plane to Brazil. Did you know how long you're going to stay out there? Or you just
bought a one-way ticket?
So what happened in Brazil? And please don't tell me what happens in Brazil stays in Brazil, because this is not Brazil's not like Vegas.
I had a good time in Brazil. But I needed to heal. I actually flew into Rio, spent 2 days, and then went up north to this remote fishing village. Nobody spoke a lick of anything but Portuguese.
Wow.
And I spent the first month there just like healing.
So how did, I mean, because I think one of the things that hold people back. Because, I mean, just from what you've said, you obviously have a very fearless spirit about you.
I will go anywhere.
About being able to just like go to the airport and be like, yep, book a ticket. This is where I'm going. And, you know, so you are in this remote village and nobody speaks English.
No, like.
So how did that what was the experience like? Were you not scared? How did you communicate?
Nope. Especially with the two, when I moved to Belgium, you didn't even have like Google Translate and all of that. You just have to learn. If you want to eat and live, you have to learn. With Brazil, it was much easier because your phone's like, you have a computer. I mean, you can ask. And I did Duolingo Portuguese and pretty much got by that I can get by in Portuguese now. But I think the remote village may be too much for some people. But if you go to, like, Sao Paulo is a big international city. There are English speakers, all of that. So you can choose a safer way to go into the society. But most countries are the same. Like, the societies are the same. People are trying to work, feed their kids, all of that. So I think most people are afraid because they're scared of not knowing. Because now everybody on the internet is an expert and all of that. And I have always been curious and always happy to admit I don't know something. And you kind of need that to just go off into a society, especially when you don't know the language, because you don't know. You don't know how to speak. You don't know the customs, the culture. So your curiosity is what gets you by, and just being a decent person. Because I stayed at a little Airbnb. It was like the guy was a fisherman, the lady was a homemaker, and they like would rent a room. So it was like me in the room, all of that. And she was so curious. She knew a little Spanish. I knew Spanish, so we would kind of do Spanish Portuguese communication. But she was so curious about me and the world and all of that. So it's a two-way street.
Because again,
people are curious about you.
Because it's like, I mean, I'm sure for them, you come in with your worldly knowledge, and I mean, I'm making assumptions, but I'm guessing probably they may not have even left.
They never left the village.
Right, so for them it must have been like, wow, this amazing person who's coming from the world and bringing the world to them. So then it becomes that thing of you're both learning from each other.
Yeah. And that's, I think, with traveling, curiosity, and then be willing to like be uncomfortable. So I've stayed in 5-star hotels and all of that. I've also slept in hostels in a hut on the floor, like, and from what I saw, like when I was backpacking, it was mostly like white kids. When I would see another black person, we'd be like, yes, because I find even when I tried to travel with friends from the US, if it wasn't 5-star, if it wasn't a fancy, they wouldn't want to go. But you're not going to learn a culture or people that way. My best experiences is living with a family, renting a room, or like doing an Airbnb, and the people tell you where to go locally and all of that. It's not going to be these all-inclusive resorts where it's a gilded cage, because that's what those things are. Or these like fancy hotel, like that's not how most people live. That's like coming to London and staying at the Four Seasons and saying, "Oh, I know London." Like that's not how you get to know people. And I have friends from all over the world now, because you meet them traveling, you stay in touch. You may travel somewhere else together, or when you go to visit their country, you have a place to stay. Like that's how you build a connection. It's the people, not the places. And I find that people just want to go and stay in the fanciest area. Well, that's one way to travel, but you're not gonna like if you're trying to learn about culture and people, there are other ways to get
so
in.
For somebody out there who's listening, who's thinking, oh my god, I would love to just be able to quit my job and go live somewhere for 6 months, travel for a year, what are the steps or advice you would give that person? Like, what did you do in terms of like, because I think the other thing people are always thinking about is like, oh, I've got all this stuff, I've got my life here.
Oh no.
And you know, what advice would you give to like help them?
So
be able to...
I Airbnb'd my flat when I left, and my friends would take care of it for me. But I also have friends who've just given up all their possessions, put it in storage or sell it. So I have a friend I met in Brazil. She's now in Fiji. She's Nigerian American. She hasn't stopped traveling since I met her 5 years ago. I met her in Brazil. She kept going. She's now on the other side of the world. And what she does is like works in hostels, do little summer jobs, do little jobs that get you money, and then travel cheap places. Like if you backpack through Asia, that's dirt cheap. And you don't even need to work at a hostel. You can work here, save up, and go live 6 months to a year in Southeast Asia and spend next to nothing traveling around. So you could do a mixture of working while you're still there. And then, like, I love seeing the kids that are now, like, blogging about their travel experience. Like, this is also a business. You can be
a very lucrative business.
You can be a travel influencer. I mean, I didn't do any of that, but now, if I did it now, I would definitely start a blog or get my Instagram going and all of that, and get, like, offers from brands and all of that. So my thing is, like, work, save up, get rid of your stuff, or leave it with your parents or put it in storage. And then like travel. And you can also travel and come back. You don't have to stay out for 2 years. Like I actually learned how to like travel even more from Belgians. Because Belgians, like especially in their 20s, they finish university and they go traveling for years. No, it's not a gap year. It's like their 20s spent traveling. And what they do, they'll come back to Belgium, work 6 months, and then I don't recommend this, HMRC, but collect unemployment and then go traveling. And then go traveling again for another 6 months. But even if you don't collect unemployment, that 6 months you work stretches because you're staying in hostels, you're eating for cheap, you're drinking for cheap, you're meeting other people. So it doesn't have to be expensive. And if you look online, you can get cheap tickets. If you travel off peak, if you make connections, it's so much cheaper and easier to travel. I think what stops people? They say it's money, but it's actually courage.
Yeah.
They're afraid to do it because once they do it, they're like, oh, why didn't I do it? Because I see a lot of that now. Now that people.
I mean, I just read Wild by Cheryl Strayed, and she just randomly, I mean, her mom had died and she was going through a lot, and she decided in the early 90s, I think, to hike the Pacific California Trail.
Of her on Oprah.
And, I mean, I read this book, and my takeaway from that, because number one, she never hiked
in her life,
in her life, and you know, she didn't even know what she didn't know at the time when she made this decision. But just because she was like, it was part of her grieving process, something was just driving her to take this journey. And, you know, and somewhere along the line, she met somebody actually from, I think, was it Finland or Switzerland? And somebody said, oh, you're on a mission journey. And that's essentially what it was. But when I read this book, my takeaway was, there's nothing impossible that you cannot do. Because all through like even the things that she had prepared for, and then the things that she couldn't have prepared for, but when she got there, just having to like there was one where a tree had fallen down, and it was a case of, okay, I can either go back, or I've got this big monster backpack on me, and I just need to crawl myself over this huge tree. And she did that, and then there was like 3 more trees.
But you've done it once,
and
so
exactly.
And
throughout this the memoir, and she talks about how, you know, sometimes she would just have to like psych herself to get through it, and essentially that's what it was. She, you know, she developed courage that she did not even imagine that she had. And I know even for me, some of my own personal experiences, I look back and I'm like, how did I do that? And at the time, it was a case of I didn't have
one
any
foot in front of the other.
Ignorance
is bliss sometimes.
Right,
like you just
literally. I mean,
set on the path. I
mean, being an entrepreneur and running my own business this last 4.5 years, if I knew then the things that I know now, I probably would never have started. Just because ignorance was bliss. I didn't know half of the stuff, but at the same time, I also know that, you know, part of the benefits you get from courage is the opportunities, like meeting new friends and exploring new things. Now, one thing though is I know I'm not necessarily a 5-star hotel kind of person. But I don't like
your
camping.
Comforts,
I don't like camping.
No, I was there. I learned to camp in Europe, outdoors. Now I camp at festivals. So now
my God. Like I can't even do festivals. I can't. I mean, I guess.
But there's a middle ground. You don't have to go to that.
Because for me, I think I was lucky. I started traveling at a young age. I didn't get to travel as much as I wanted to, but by the time I had my daughter, I felt like I'd already traveled enough that I didn't at the time feel like I was missing out. Now that scratch is coming back, and it's literally like. And I feel like the life that I envision for myself later on is a nomad life where I'm not restricted to one particular place. I can live and work somewhere for 3 months, 6 months, and just do all of that. And I think, you know, I know that that's what's in my future, even though right now I can't envision exactly where. But I'm just like,
but there's so many opportunities now. So I wish people will look into that. There's remote working for companies all over there. I mean, you could be in Fiji.
I have a friend who got married, moved back to Nigeria, and she's doing remote work, and the company's based in, I think, in the UK or the US, and you know, she's remote working in Nigeria and getting to travel to Senegal and all these amazing places.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities than when I'm old. So when I started,
she's not out.
that just didn't exist. I kind of created my own remote working, but I wish I was young now, because I would go move to Fiji or Thailand or something and work for one of these big companies. Or just go on the ground. Like when I went to Abu Dhabi to see a friend who I'd met in Cuba. And so many people were teaching English. There were so many Black Americans there teaching English, making a fortune. And every weekend we're off to some different place because the Emirates are a transport hub. So they were going all over the world, paying nothing for it. And even if you do that 2-3 years, like, your life is enriched. The money is tax free. So you don't have to do the like
you're
camping.
not a tree.
Yes.
You can move.
Yeah,
like,
you don't have to do the hardcore camping. There are like more bougie ways to travel and live around the world.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, okay, so of all the countries that you've been to, that you've lived in, and you've kind of like, you know, transit through, what 3 of your favorite countries and why?
Okay, so Brazil, just because
obviously,
it's just, I have my problems with Brazil because it is not the racial utopia people think it is, but it's a beautiful country. And one of the reasons I went to Brazil, I didn't say, was because of Bahia. I wanted to go to Salvador because they still had that connection to Africa.
Yes.
And I went to a Condoble ceremony, all of that. It's like, in Jamaica, yes, we have some of it, more than in a lot of places, but you really feel Africa in Brazil.
I mean, I've listened to I've listened to the Yoruba religion and persisting in Brazil, it's speaking Yoruba better than me.
Yeah, it's
and I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, so like, that lived up to the expectations. Bahia really did. South Africa, I love. Despite its problems.
Which part I was not expecting that. South Africa. Which part of South Africa did you go to?
Cape Town, Joburg, Durban, and then some of the east, Port Elizabeth, all of that. So from Joburg all the way down. And again, another country with with problems, but really beautiful. Like it's physically stunning, the country, no matter where you go. It's just something, and just culturally rich. So really like those. What's fine for the third? The third is hard. I really like Cambodia.
Okay.
Yeah. Went to Angkor Wat and all of that, and to see like such an ancient culture, and now this country like trying to get itself out of poverty. But like the people are like really beautiful. The food was good. The history was really nice.
Oh my God. How I wish I could just get on a plane and just go to one of these countries right now. Amazing. So, okay, so you've lived this incredible life of just traveling, working, and, you know, do you feel that the life that you're living now is the one of your choosing?
Yes, after my burnout, I now feel like this is the life I want. Because before that, like I said, I was failing upwards. And I was also like, I was married. I was doing things because that was the right thing to do. And just being honest with myself, like, I don't care if I'm married. I don't want children. Just owning into that. And now understanding, no, this is my life. I have my nephew, I have my godchildren. I'm enriched by children in my life, but I don't need to physically have one. And then in terms of a partner, like if the right person comes around that makes me happy. So it's the same like the job choices, not because like I've been chosen, but that doesn't mean I have to choose you. If you don't enrich my life in some way, like I'm not gonna be with you just to be with you. And I think that's hard, especially for Black successful women, because no matter your success, all people want to know is,
are you married? Have you got kids?
And being at peace with knowing that no, I'm neither of those things, and kids are never going to be an option. But also marriage, if I don't meet someone, like I'm happy. I've curated my life to have good people in it, men and women that are part of my tribe and part of my circle, and I lead a good life. So yes, what happens, great, but you have to enrich that in some way. You can't detract from it.
As somebody who's always known that she wanted children, but I've also just always admired women who didn't want children. And also as somebody who tell women all the time that unless you absolutely want children, don't do it. Don't do it because, you know, as a social worker, I worked with a lot of adults who had problems because their parents didn't want them, not because of anything else, not because their parents were divorced. It was mainly because these parents should not have been parents. They should never have had children.
But there's a lot of pressure from society.
I hate that thing about maternal instinct. It's a fallacy. Nobody has maternal instinct.
Yeah.
You develop it as you grow with your child, as you learn about it.
And you don't have to have your own child.
Exactly.
Like I said, like I have plenty of kids in my life who I love and spoil to death.
Yeah.
That's maternal.
Yeah.
I don't have to be their mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think so. I think for me, it's like, because again, it's one of those things that a lot of women don't always talk about.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily share that story of, yes, I'm in my 40s. I don't have kids and I don't want kids.
I'm child free by choice.
Right?
By choice.
And at what stage in your life did you kind of make that decision? Is it something that you've always known?
I've always known. But I think making it like formal, when I was in long-term relationships, I would say I didn't want kids, but men tend to think you're going to change your mind, like, oh, every woman says that. And I've, like, literally, as I said, I was married in Belgium. I walked away from that marriage because I had to say to him, I'm like, I told you from the beginning. And it's not like he was pressuring, but I could see he was waiting for me to change my mind. And I'm like, it's been 7 years, dude. Like, it's not gonna happen. Now he's engaged, not married, which I rag him about, with 2 kids, and I'm like, that was your path. And I loved you enough to step out to make that happen, because that's when I knew, I'm like, I love this man, but not enough to do something I don't want to do. And that's when it was concrete
to be able
for
to
me.
do that. I mean, I love this woman so much. I wish you guys know, like, no, seriously, but I mean, it's a courage and a strength that I pray and hope for more women, because, and again, so, society is so unforgiving of women who make that choice and then express regret about that choice. Because I remember there was an article that I read a couple of years ago, and I mean, it was anonymously, and, interviewed a couple of women, and even just the vitriol of hatred that these people were getting about just disclosing that actually I'm a mom, but I regret it. I wish I'd been strong enough
to say no
to society's pressure, and so kudos. And obviously my daughter's one of your godchildren.
Exactly.
So I just love I love the fact that you can be, because you have so much to give. You might not necessarily be giving it with your own children, but you're still giving other children.
Oh, yeah.
You're creating
the
opportunity.
Village,
yes.
I'm very much for the village.
Yeah.
And I get to send them home to you people. So.
Yes. And, I mean, I think for me, one of the things that I find joy in, I love being a mom, but I also love the days when I'm not a mom, or the times when I'm not a mom. You're still a woman.
You're still a person.
And I always, in Nigeria, you're when you have a child, you are known by the child's your title is now the mother of this child.
Oh, wow. So your identity
is tied to the children that you bear. And so for me, as somebody who's always been like, yes, I'm Iya, mother of this child, but I'm also Tokumbo, and I was Tokumbo before I was a mom, and I'm gonna be Tokumbo whilst I'm being a mom, whilst the child is grown. And for me, I always, when I meet women, especially when their child get older and then they now trying to find
their identity,
and it's like,
you have to maintain your identity even if you have children. What are you passionate about? Do you have a hobby? Do something that makes you regardless.
I mean, it's funny for me because my daughter goes away to her dad, and then when she's away, I'll be like, oh, I miss the little bugger. And then she comes up and I'm like,
go back.
Good stuff. What else? This has been so much fun.
Thank you for having me.
Like I said, we're probably going to have to do a whole episode around negotiation tactics, LinkedIn profile, and just create, because I think, you have so much value to give in terms of just your, experiences professionally, personally, and how you've been able to, climb this corporate ladder, but still retain the essence of who you are. And I applaud you for that. I think it's incredible. You've definitely inspired me, and as somebody who is at a space in my life where I am thinking about I've been doing that evaluation, and I'm realizing that as much as I love being an entrepreneur, actually, I've always said it, I'm an accidental entrepreneur. And if the right job came along,
Of course,
I would be like, you know what? I'm gonna pack this full-time business and become a side hustle, because I do see the value of working for other people and working in a global company, because I know definitely that I see myself as somebody who wants to be able to live and work in lots of different countries. So now I'm at the stage where I'm actively thinking about looking for work again, and your support in terms of just helping me. I sent Kerrita my CV and she sent it back to me, and I was like, I want this person. I want to hire this person. Like, the upgrade that you gave my CV, my professional self-esteem just went up the roof. And even just being able to help me think about how to look at my LinkedIn profile, and then having a recruiter approach me based on your suggestion, I was like, ooh, this woman's really just like, so
but it's like women and Black people, we downplay ourselves, and the skills you have, even skills that don't come from the job, things in your life are also skills. So it's how you look at things, and then make sure that's reflected on your page, on your CV. And people don't do that. They're like, oh, I just did this, and then you talk to them and you're like, my God, you've done so many amazing things. Why is none of this on the paper? So always think broadly about what you do.
Amazing. Okay, so if you could kind of like, what would be one parting advice, or something takeaway that you'd want to share with the audience, that you just want, what's the one thing what's the legacy that you want to be known for, and what's the one thing that you want to be able to like pass on to other young Black women out there who maybe at the beginning of their career, maybe midway to their career, or maybe actually at the top of their career, but still not feeling fulfilled and at peace?
I think be curious, be courageous. Because I can give you tips on how to switch from jobs to job, but the red thread through my career is always like, oh, I wonder if I can do that, or why not do that? It's just like, always think like, why not you? Why is the other person more qualified than you? So be curious. Oh, look what's happening in the world, making sure that you keep up to date with it, but also curiosity inward. Is this the right thing for me? Am I doing what I love, what I'm passionate about? Is there more that I can be doing? Can I learn something more? Like, too many people finish school and they stop learning. They act like school was the only place you could learn. Like, I'm a podcast addict. I read how many books. I go to events. Like, I'm always curious about the world. And I'm not curious like, oh, I go to the theater and maybe this will come in handy. No, I like the theater. I'm curious about it. I like art, all of that. But that comes back into my work because there's a creative aspect to my work. And what I've seen in the world, I can then bring in. So I think people need to realize curiosity is for life. It's like, be like a child. Always be curious about the world. And then just make the step. All they can say is no.
Yes. Oh, I am such a big proponent of ask and you should receive. And if they say no, you will know what's up when you started.
Then where you started. Yeah. And you'd be surprised how many people will say yes. How many doors will open. And don't let the first no stop you. You can have 2, 3, 10 no's, but then the 11th no is like the opportunity. The 11th person is a yes, and it's the opportunity of a lifetime. So, but that comes from like courage and curiosity.
So be curious, be courageous. I love it. And what's the legacy that you want to leave behind, or what's the one thing that drives you in terms of knowing that this is what I stand for and this is what I want to achieve?
So I want to open the door for people behind me. I don't want to be a Highlander. If that's my legacy, I have failed. I want people. I grew up in Flatbush, Brooklyn. That's like saying you grew up in Peckham or Brixton. Like, so I want people to understand that you can open doors. And yes, it's going to be hard. Don't let but Oprah did it. Like, Oprah also had a lot of advantages once she got into the world. And I'm always honest about, like, going to the right school was the right thing. Getting the right jobs, getting the right mentors. Yes, it's going to be work. but you can get to what you can get to. You can fulfill your dreams, and not because of where you come from or your family history or whatever. Put yourself in the right positions, work hard, network.
Yes.
Like some of my best mentors have been white men. And I think a lot of people are now like, oh, like everything is racist. Yes, the world is racist, but why should that stop you? Like, connect with the people who want to help you and who want to like put you forward, and like work at it and keep going. But don't just sit there and say my postcode is going to stop me, or my color of my skin. There's always going to be something against you. Don't let it define who you are.
So if people wanted to follow you, find out about you, reach out to you, what's the best place to connect with you?
So on LinkedIn, you can find me by my name, and I'll spell it because it's quite long. So Kerrita is Kerrita, and my last name is McClaughlyn. It's McClaughlyn. And then my Twitter is Kerrita MCC. So it's KerritaMCC.
Amazing. So yeah, make sure you connect with this woman. Honestly, whether you're looking for a new job or you just want to learn how to network or find a mentor, she is incredible. And since I've known her, since I've met her, she has just been pushing me and encouraging me and being so supportive of me. So I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you. I am so blessed to have you in my life, to be in your tribe, and to have you in my tribe. And you are just amazing. Seriously.
Thank you. I need to do this every day. Thank you.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed, and also please do leave us a review on Apple Podcast, and make sure you share the Tokunboh Chronicles with a friend, and just tweet at us. Let me know what is that you enjoyed the most. Tweet at Kerrita, and just get back to us and let me know what you want to hear more of. It's been a pleasure talking to you.